Today's sponsor is Datadog. If your business is being driven by software, you know today's applications are more complex than ever. They're sitting on multiple layers of infrastructure and distributed services, and it can be very complicated to manage. Datadog brings visibility into every part of your infrastructure, as well as APM monitoring for your application's performance. Customizable dashboards, collaboration tools, and alerts let you develop your own workflow for observability and incident response. And Datadog integrates seamlessly with all of your apps and systems, from Amazon Web Services to Kubernetes to MySQL, so you can get visibility in minutes. You want to get started now? Go to datadog.com/cloudcast to get started with Datadog and get a free t-shirt.
This week's show is brought to you by Media Temple. Whether you're looking to migrate a business-critical site or application to the cloud, Media Temple is your trusted team. Their experts can help you move to the cloud, maximize application performance, and find peace with your infrastructure once you're there. Visit MediaTemple.net to learn more about all of their managed cloud services and to unlock the full potential of your virtual private cloud or the public cloud.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast, coming to you live from the massive studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. Just me tonight. Aaron is tied up with some work things and some family things. A couple of quick housekeeping things tonight. First off, congratulations to the folks from IO Pipe. They were on, Adam Johns was on just a couple of weeks ago, and they got a big round of funding, a couple of $1 million in funding. So the serverless market is alive and well. And I think by our count, as best we can tell, it takes us just a little bit over $8 billion in funding that our guests have gotten, either funding or acquisition costs. So that's always kind of a fun milestone for us to keep track of. So congratulations to all the companies out there still getting funding. And one other small little side note, and this has nothing to do with the Cloudcast, but just kind of a plug. I started a second podcast. Myself and Tyler Britton started a podcast that's very focused on Kubernetes and containers. Not that we won't cover that in this space a little bit, but we're going to dive real deep and probably a little deeper than we typically do on this show. So the show is called Pod CTL, POD CTL, or Pod Cuddle or Pod Control, however you want to pronounce it. But if you're interested in that sort of stuff, feel free to jump over there. I would love a follow or a rating or some feedback. So anyways, with that, tonight's going to be an interesting show. This show may run a little bit long because we may get into some stuff, but the good folks from the Geek Whisperers, who a lot of you know, I know a lot of you listen to. So John Troyer and Amy Lewis and Matthew Broberg, Brender. So longtime friends of the show, folks, welcome on. And I kind of brought all you on today because you guys have some news, which people will take in different ways, but I think it's a good thing. And so happy to have you on this side of the microphone. I've been on your podcast before, but Amy and John and Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
So why don't one of you tell us what's going on with the Geek Whisperers?
Well, we sort of had a moment where every book has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the three of us, like we always do, sat down and talked about it. And we said, you know what? We feel like we're coming to a good place to end this. And conveniently at the 140th episode, which will be the one we record at VMworld upcoming.
Excellent.
So just like Twitter. Yeah.
It's been, a really interesting journey, right? When we first started, as one did at the time, where there were, and when we wore onions on our belts or whatever, there was this company called VMware, Cisco, and EMC, and they had a child, a little spinoff called VCE, and we happened to come from those companies purely by coincidence, and we were all at these big companies, and we were trying to figure out our jobs and how you do this relationship-based marketing and how tech communities work, and how we could add a human element to all this corporate stuff. And we are all several jobs away from that one point, and so it's been a really interesting journey. But it's looking back on it, we were both in the same place and in a very different place than we are now. And wait, now we're all really busy with new gigs as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because you guys, when you got started, there was kind of a social media and communities angle to it. There's an interesting thread that sort of weaves through a lot of our lives, in that Greg Neerman, who runs Speaking in Tech, sort of way back in the day, taught Aaron and I how to first do podcasting. He was doing a different show, but kind of taught us the ropes. Amy, you're now doing some things or you have been doing for quite a while, co-hosting on Speaking in Tech. I know Aaron and I used to listen to John's VMware community podcast, like I think it was every Wednesday afternoon. So, we always learned about, how to be consistent. And John taught us not to spend hours and hours taking ums and ahs out of the show. And Matt, we've picked your brain about a whole lot of different things. We've worked at companies together. And so, I thought it would be good, since a lot of the things that we do together are kind of interrelated, to kind of talk about it. Maybe think about this as sort of like an exit interview, more so than the parents, than mom and dad are getting hobbies that don't converge anymore. So let's start with that. I mean, a lot's changed since you guys got started in 2012. So just a little after we got started with the Cloudcast. A million things have changed in technology. It kind of went from hardware to software and on-prem to cloud and open source weaved in there. And I guess if you were looking back, or you're thinking about where you are now, like what of these big mega trends that we talk about all the time, like which ones do you sort of still look at and say, I think I got a really good handle on them, and others you're like, boy, it's either too new or it's too chaotic. I just don't have a handle on it yet from 5 years of talking to people about it.
Well, I will say, like a lot of our circle, if you get beyond our immediate circle, it gets further and further away from hardware and closer to software. Like John said, coming from the VMware, EMC, Cisco communities, we had a bit of an aggregation point around influencers in this predominantly hardware-based part of the market. I personally feel like there's still lots to be said about how unique our space is, like the space that we're coming from, and the type of jobs and type of work people do when they're coming from a pure startup SaaS community, and whether that is totally portable to the world that we're a part of.
Yeah, looking at all that change, right? Matt's very much in the open source world more than he was back in the day. I still work a lot with people who call themselves IT, and I'm still looking at that transition. What the heck is going on there? Is ops really what IT used to be? Is DevOps a thing if you don't make software? I'm also working in other spaces like software and IoT and other things like that. So the world is big, and it is changing, and I scratch my head. I'm not sure. I follow along. I try to follow the leading edge as neat as I can. But Brian, I'm going to ask you this: is serverless really important to most of IT yet?
I don't. I think the answer is probably no. I think but what's always interesting is there's always a really small but very loud faction. Whether it's serverless or something else that's new, wants to convey to you that it is really big. And it's one of those weird games we play in our industry, sometimes because people are trying to get VC funding, or sometimes because, goodness, they're crazy enough to think that on day one they're going to compete with a behemoth like Oracle or somebody like that, so they got to make themselves look big, right? Like it's like if you see a bear out in the woods, right? What do they say? Like make yourself look big. So yeah, you're right. It is one of the things I think even Aaron and I think about to this day is, do we really have a grasp on a lot of these trends, or are we sort of floating along, and sometimes we see a buoy and it makes sense, and other times we're kind of out at sea. So
I have to jump in. So one, it doesn't seem like it ever changes. It still seems to be the damn year of VDI.
Yeah.
It's coming anytime soon, Amy.
Oh my gosh. And Brian, I feel like you and I have been having this conversation in particular for a million years, but it still comes up. So what are the most fascinating things to me is, you're absolutely right. So many things have shifted, but it is some of the classics are still in place, which I appreciate. As an industry, it says we both move really quickly, and we have to chew on things for some time before we get it right, because in the end, we're people using technology. That factor never goes away. And so there may be new and shiny things, but in the end, people want to use their devices anytime, anywhere, and not necessarily leak all the company secrets all over dirty hotel Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and the Geek Whisperers, we really found our stride when we started interviewing people about their career trajectories and their job titles. And I mean, it's 5 years later, and I still don't freaking know where an evangelist best fits in an org chart. And we could continue arguing that for ages.
Or if it's even a good job, right?
Yeah, you guys. I know you guys talked about that on your last show with Nick Howell. It's interesting because if I think about just sort of beginning and now for all of you, I mean, John, you were a venture-backed CEO before you did the VMware thing, so you were in charge, and then you were kind of riding you created to a certain extent the VMware community, so it was pulling you, and now you're back to being a CEO. Matt, you were on the other end of tech support. People were yelling at you. You were kind of trying to keep people away from trying to tear you limb from limb, making stuff work, and now you're trying to you're trying to coordinate people to want to work together. And I don't know if anybody knows this story, but like Amy, the first time I met Amy, she literally walked in my office and said, "Hey, somebody said you could explain, like, I think it was VDI, coincidentally, to me. I work over in marketing or PR or something." And I was like, "Who in the world are you? And why do you want me to explain this stuff to you?" But it's interesting to me, like, the contrast between all those jobs and the transitions that people have gone through. I think if you step back and looked at it just from like A to B, you'd go, man, those are ridiculously large steps. How did you sort of manage them yourselves over the last 5 or 6, 7 years? And then what do you think you've seen commonality wise in the people that you've talked to? Because you've literally talked to hundreds of people about how they've gone over the last 5, 6, 10 years of their careers.
I think that some of the trends, and I'm still laughing about that VDI story. And if we're going to tell all our listeners the truth, Brian ignored me for 3 weeks until he sent me a note that said, "Okay, you need to bring some leg warmers, some changes of clothes. Don't call HR. We've got a project to work on."
I made you stand on a ladder. That was,
I've seen those videos. I've seen those videos.
No, you haven't seen the ones we didn't release.
The origin story of Comms Ninja as
not
a content
works.
marketer.
In talking to people over the years, one of the things that's been fascinating, the commonality, and John sort of hit on this. I shouldn't steal his thunder, but to highlight his care and feeding of this community is curiosity. So the one characteristic that we found in interviewing hundreds of people over and over again, the thing that makes people successful is being curious. You can't coach it. You can't force it. You can't pay extra money for it. People are or they aren't, and they have to find it within themselves. And we found that direct correlation between job success and happiness and their curiosity.
What about, like, for example, I mean, Matthew, you moved across the country for a new job at one point. John, you went from being a CEO to not being a CEO. I mean, those are kind of big unknowns. In some cases, people might think they're a step forward. Others might think they're a step back. Like, how did you deal with sort of that big, what seemed like career uncertainty stuff, or have you seen other people manage it in interesting kind of repeatable ways?
Well, Brian, you're hitting on one of my favorite themes of Geek Whisperers, which is everyone's on some strange nonlinear career path these days. Very rarely will you come across someone that's been at a place for 20 plus years. And if they have, they've already been there for 20 years. I don't know if there's anyone that's going to be following them for 20 years. So in also a funny way, I think the three of us, Amy, John, and I, have all accidentally become examples of Geek Whisperers guests by doing weird things with their jobs. And at some point, people just get an opportunity that shows up and you take a leap of faith and you give it a go. I think, speaking for my own, going from, a bit of a community marketing into developer advocacy, and then taking a role that brought me across the country for it. It was just one of those things where it just felt right and people take the leap. I think of John evolving in his career and then going back to starting another company, being along those same lines where I don't think anyone would have guessed we would have gone those directions, but it felt right at the time, and that you're going forward, but it's definitely in a nonlinear pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we tried not to talk to just like super successful people. But the super successful people we did talk to, all of them could not have predicted the path they took to get where they are. And so, everybody has multiple careers, right? Our careers are multiple decades long. I have a PhD in chemistry, right? And I use the computer part of it and the internet part of it but I'm not using the rest. But I'm also using some of the critical thinking skills and the study skills and the research skills that I learned. So, I mean, we saw people who are curious, who are passionate, but I think maybe if I had to give some discrete lessons or to us or to whatever is for people in a gig, whether it's marketing or IT, you need to be connected to the business and you need to know how you're impacting the business. And if you just sit there and optimize your little swim lane, that's doing your job. But if you can look bigger or go out and see how you could have a bigger impact, that it can potentially be, much more impactful. So, don't just, I don't know. I'm preaching for people to not just do their job, but that's not fair, right? Do your job well. Right. Maybe that's what we're talking about.
Well, and I think what you're kind of saying is be good at your job, but probably equally be aware, if not curious, about what's around you, what impacts your job. What drives the customers to come to your business and buy things? What does the supply chain look like for your business? How many pieces are involved? Are all those pieces still going to be relevant? Can you impact how that, all those sort of things, or, how might a government regulation impact your business, and should you get knowledgeable about that? And will that knowledge help you, somehow in the business or in your job or in your job search?
Also, don't be an evangelist. So I'm just going to come out and say it.
Yeah. So in that context, I know you guys have gone through some ebbs and flows around the concept of how technology gets talked about. And, long ago it was somebody sent out a disk drive and Steve Ballmer made a cheesy commercial. And then there were technical marketing people and evangelists and advocates. And the spreading of technology has gone through a lot of things. Obviously, it's different now than even it was 5 or 6 years ago when you got started. Is there a piece of advice you'd give somebody if you talk to them today than if you talked to them, say, 5 years ago? Or do you feel like a lot of the same things in terms of being in the tech industry is like you said, it's curiosity and having multiple skills? Or do you feel like there's something really different today that you would start to tell people, give them advice about being successful in their career or diving into wanting to learn about a technology or something along those lines? Well,
we came to this, and I don't know if I'm speaking for all of us, if I should, but see if you disagree with me. We figured out, so a lot of the advice still holds. Be curious, be active, participate, go beyond, be good at what you're doing right now while you stretch to the next thing. But the evangelist thing is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it came to be something we really hammered on in the last half of our episodes of be relevant to the business. And it's funny, I think if you go back and look at a lot of the early work we did around social media and marketing, in some ways that was all of us trying to figure out how we talk to our own business, how we prove value. It's a question we got a million times, right? How anybody in the social media world or influence marketing world, before it was even a thing, showed value to the business. And we realized in some ways when we started interviewing people and started talking about job titles and paths, we forgot to link it back to that. So if I had one piece of advice that I would underscore twice and exclamation point with my sparkle pen, be relevant to the business. Find a way to love what you do. Find a way to make it relevant to the business. And if they don't understand how that is, find a way to tell them the story of how it's relevant. Prove your relevance.
Or find some place that finds you relevant.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Good. Fair point, Matt.
There's a timing issue here too, right? In that, I think all the people listening to this are technologists, right? The technology has to be at the right time, right? If you're building some basic container management thing a couple years ago, that's interesting. A couple years from now, not so interesting.
Right.
If you were if you knew about like this World Wide Web thing back 20, 30 years ago, you could become a webmaster. But, now you need to specialize. So when social media and corporate kind of collided, this social media evangelist kind of grew. But now, again, it's a timing. Now there's some slightly more nuanced roles. You need to be in marketing or sales or the CTO's office or something like that.
Well, and like you said, it sort of became a little bit of a running joke or a meme on your show. But I think it's relevant in that it highlights kind of the pace at which things move and change, right? Like you said, John, what's relevant today or what may feel cutting edge today, 2 or 3 years from now, should be a mainline skill, or it should be an automated process, or it should be whatever. I know, at least with the Cloudcast, we started off thinking that we were going to talk about, this phenomenon of of merging together, compute and storage and networking. I think we originally called the show Two Guys and One Wire before that whole other meme was going on.
Wow, that's a terrible name.
Yeah, I know.
That's terrible.
We learned about that after the fact. That lasted for one show. But it and we look at what we talk about these days, and it's everything that we thought about 5 or 6 years ago is not irrelevant, but not interesting. So in that vein, a lot of the people that you talk to, whether it was around curiosity or changing jobs or dealing with new technology, like a part of that is having to learn something new. It feels like to a certain extent, and tell me if you would agree with this or disagree, does it feel like the tech industry is moving faster than ever? Is it harder to learn new things, or is it's just new names and new concepts that you've got to learn, but the way people learn is still the same? What have you seen or heard from people about how they keep up, or tips and tricks they have for finding that extra hour a day or a week to learn the new stuff to stay ahead of things?
Well, I'll try to tackle the first part of are things growing faster, and I don't think the pace has changed. I do think the expectation on what an individual knows, that domain has grown exponentially. Where we used to have our nice nestled, I know CPU related things and the servers on them and maybe just the operating system. And now it's, go beyond that. Go to the code of the application and go to the configuration management and understand the storage requirements and the runtime. And I think everyone's struggling with, at what layer of the software stack do I stop and where does somebody else pick up? And as people evolve from our community of Cisco and VMware peoples and EMC peoples, from their single domain to a multi-domain future, I think everyone's still a little anxious about what do I have to know and what do I rely on other people to do? And until we dial in on what that looks like, I think there's going to be this continued sense of angst. I don't know. What do you think, Whisperers?
Well, I'll definitely vouch for the sense of angst, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in our culture and our world as well, right? That seems to move very, very quickly. And I don't know, Matt. I mean, I look at some fields like web dev and front end, right? There is a new JavaScript framework every month, I swear. And you're kind of expected to keep up with it. And, it's React and then it's something else. And I kind of see that a little bit as hardware becomes software. And, Kubernetes was running before it was even 1.0 and people were running it in production and it made it to its first birthday. And, so I don't know. Things do seem to be either maybe they're not moving faster, but we're just aware of more things because, they're on your Facebook and Twitter feed. I do think people are overwhelmed. And I think as technologist communicators and people who are either whether you're a business person or a marketing person or you're even just trying to explain inside a company what technologies you're using, I think it's harder to break through. I think it's harder to get people's attention. And I think the kind of relationship-oriented things that we talked about on our show and that is still evergreen, right? You can go back and listen. Is a fundamental tool to break through that kind of overwhelm because it's about people, right? It is about human beings react to other human beings in a very fundamental way.
I actually agree. I think that it's more relevant than ever to stay ahead. You have to stay connected. And I don't know that I think it's actually moving any faster because I think vendor side versus customer side, it's hard not to get excited about shiny, push release. And customers still have real problems to solve. I would say I think one issue that has just popped up over and over, and I'm wonder if you guys agree, is security. I think it was the thing we didn't talk about a lot, maybe as an industry, because we were out solving some just basic infrastructural problems. And I'm sure there were folks very, very focused on it. But I think the layperson has become more focused on it, and it's become more of an integrated part. And I think it's the kind of thing you do have to stay connected to the experts and really read up and listen up to make sure that you're complying and even know what to look for and solve for.
There certainly is. It certainly is in the headlines, right? And so I think as more things move online, right, we realize what we've gotten ourselves into. Also because security people have to learn how to not be assholes. Can I say that word?
Sure.
Too late.
Yeah. I think they're learning, right? There's just those new password, the new NIST password guidelines were much more human and humane than the last version. So we're getting there.
So you folks were always, you're very positive, just personality wise. You're very upbeat as a whole. Are there things about the tech industry right now that that bother you a lot, that you're worried about, or sort of have you maybe less enthusiastic? Are there trends that you're kind of worried about?
I'm insanely pissed off at just the fact that we have to discuss whether women have a place in technology right now, and that as a trending topic is infuriating, that we have like loosely coupled science as an excuse to treat others as lesser than ourselves in this industry. So the fact that we're having that discussion publicly, I guess, is a benefit, but it gets my heart pumping and pisses me off unbelievably that we have to still, and we can't just see people that are writing code or running operations in IT as just incredibly competent people that we work with. Like God, I thought we'd be past it by now, but we're definitely not.
Anybody else? I know, John, I know you and I talk quite a bit offline, and there's lots of, is something real or not real? I mean, does that concern you, or is that just sort of the ebb and flow of technology, and, will it get adopted or not get adopted or be too much noise?
I don't know. We've touched on a couple of those. I mean, I worry about IT in general, and whether they are conscious that they're adding value to the business, right? Is there going to be an IT, and is it going to look the same in 10 years? I'm concerned with that. Nothing ever really dies, right? I laugh when people say, oh, such and such is dead, right? Nothing, once it gets in somebody's hands, ever dies, right? It may not, be popular, but people are still running Windows 95. So, nothing will, mainframes, right? COBOL, nothing will ever die. And it's fine, right? If it serves a need. I am worried about my friends and colleagues and community kind of upskilling and who when the robots come and take all of our jobs, who's left, right? I have no idea. So maybe it's going to be a different kind of IT, and it might not be so much like, maybe let's go back to Matt's point. It might not be so much like the bastard operator from hell. Boy, I am dating myself tonight. Anyway, that's an old meme for people that don't know about it.
So let's look at the flip side of that. What are you not just positive about, but what are you excited about? Whether it's something that you're sort of somewhat involved with, or one of your colleagues is involved with, or something that you look at a trend and you go, well, it's not really ready yet, but maybe it's going to be ready for your kids or the next generation of, younger generation. Is there something that, you've got sort of a sparkle in your eye for that really inspires you right now? I
have to say the democratization of access, which I know people have said is a two-edged sword, but the idea that we can break through some of the maybe traditional problems of access to information, the fact that a lot of those walls are coming down and there is greater access every day for opportunity, I think is an amazing thing. And I am an optimistic person, and I have to feel like that globalization and the realizing of the connectedness between us all, that even in our lifetime, technology has brought us, I really genuinely hope will be something that moves us forward as people.
Yeah, and I've been pretty thrilled about the future, what the future holds for transportation. I think the Hyperloop has some really interesting byproducts if it does come to be, where we won't have to aggregate so tightly around certain cities, but maybe expand out. It's going to change society if it does eventually take off. And then the autonomous car industry is quite fascinating, though I don't closely follow it. I do look forward to people not driving because we suck at it as a species. I think robots have always been ready to take that one over.
Go ahead. Let me jump in, and I'm going to echo kind of what they said. Right, I'm a big believer in connectivity and have been, right, my whole career, right, and it does uplift everybody. I'm amazed at what people can build with the tools and frameworks that are available now, and the time to value is so fast. The stuff that's going on with cloud services and modern frameworks and open source. I don't think regular mainstream IT. I think this next generation of open source and cloud are going to make things extraordinarily powerful to average knowledge workers, and that's also going to change things, and I'm kind of excited about that. And it also is going to bring better government, and I think more power to regular people to have more control over their lives. I hope. One hopes, right? Yep. I'm looking forward to that.
So I just now realized that since we're sort of friendly, I didn't give any of you a very proper introduction, and since the show is sunsetting, but none of you by any means are sunsetting. Give folks a sense of where will they still be able to, hear your rich tones or have a beer with you or, reach out to you for a conversation or advice? Like what are you all going to be doing here after VMworld that'll keep you active and visible in lots of communities?
Well, I will continue to whisper these dulcet tones in my role as the Yoko to Greg Neerman on Speaking in Tech. So I am one of the 5 principal hosts now. We kind of got a little bit of a rotation with the acknowledgement that we all live busy lives. So between the 5 of us, there's usually 2 to 3 on at any given week. And in development, I don't want to announce yet because we have a few pieces to put in place, but I have my 3rd YouTube show in development as we speak. So there will be another video show.
And you took a new job. You're no longer at SolidFire, correct?
That is correct. So I am now at VMware. So we really have come full circle because now I'm walking in the footsteps of John Troyer.
Hey now.
All right, Mr. Troyer, what's next for you, or where does the road take you?
Sure. Well, I mean, we have a company. We have a small consulting company, Tech Reckoning. I work with a lot of different companies around these kind of issues. And we also have an offshoot of that, the Influence Marketing Council, which is a little bit easier way for companies to come together in a non-consulting way to raise the level of influence marketing, influencer advocacy, community, relationship-based marketing. I also occasionally do a newsletter and appear on a podcast, and I got some more of those in the can, but we'll wait to announce those. But I keep my hat in as kind of blogger / analyst. In fact, I'm working on a big essay on what the heck is a blogger in 2017, and I can't answer it. So I gotta hit publish since I can't come up with an actual answer.
Are you going to be at any events? Will you be at like a VMworld or an AWS reInvent or any public things these days?
I'll be at VMworld, and we don't know after that. Maybe if I very may well show up at reInvent.
Matt, what about you? How are things in Portland, and what's keeping you busy?
Portland's fantastic. So if anyone's coming around here, I'd love to meet up for coffee or food, especially now that I work from home as VP of Community for Sensu, a small startup focused on monitoring using an open core model. So I'm really excited to be recruiting people into our community from the many communities I've gotten to participate in up to now. And I'm sure I'll be creating content or jumping on content that Amy and John create in the next few years. But also, sticking to that core, right? Like we'll all be at VMworld recording our last show. And we're not going far. I think we're all evolving together. So you'll see us out there.
So very cool. Well, listen, I guess one last question. Nothing ever dies or goes away on the internet, at least usually. Will the Geek Whisperer shows remain? Will they remain somewhere? Will people be able to get them? Because you guys did a really nice job of they're not always tied to a specific time, right? They're kind of timeless because their advice. Where will they be? Where will people be able to go back and listen to all the episodes?
Well, they'll continue to be at geek-whisperers.com as long as Matt keeps on paying his hosting bills.
So Matt's going to start a GoFundMe for $10 a month.
Yes. Yeah. I certainly wouldn't mind the help, but we'll keep that live for forever as long as people need them. And I think we have every intention of refreshing, like bringing content back up as people see it. We definitely have our favorite shows that we'd love to revisit, and we would love other people to do so. If you have a show that you've listened to that really stuck out to you, write a blog post about it and link to it. Help us find the best of, because while we're not recording any new ones, like we've all said, the content is still evergreen. It's still great advice from really thoughtful people about their careers.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully at some point here in the next couple of years, Netflix will decide to bring podcasting on and bring back old shows like Full House, and you guys will get a huge like $30 million deal to bring back the Geek Whisperers on Netflix or something.
Well, Brian, I feel like we have to, in true Geek Whisperers fashion, ask you a question.
All right.
Aside from naming a podcast, Two Guys in a String, what is one thing in ending a show and sort of twilighting and parking it? What's some advice for us? What would you never do again?
In terms of the podcast, you mean like what would you never do on the podcast, or just in life in general?
Yeah, when you're bringing something to a close, how can we do it gracefully? What's something we should avoid?
I always like to sort of have a clean break, tie it up, put a bow on it, have a party, have a drink. I don't like to put it in the context of funerals. I've had some people in my life who have passed on, and the best ends are always when people say, "Hey, look, let's celebrate what we did. Let's not be sad about it. Let's celebrate what we did." You guys have a lot to celebrate. I think you're gonna find a lot of people wish that you were, turning up in their earbuds every, week or so, or whatever day that you were always on. But, don't look back from it. It was a great accomplishment. Obviously it's the friendship continues, which is better than a lot of things. And, take that away from it. And, everything else is just, an experience, right? It was all good. So I wish you all, not that you're going away, but in terms of the Geek Whisperers, I wish you all the best of luck afterwards, post Whispers, when you go out on your solo tour and end up on the Behind the Podcast show at some point on VH1. But yeah, I won't be at VMworld. Aaron will be at VMworld, so maybe he can make he can photobomb it somehow or make a 2-minute appearance or something. But if any of you want to come on Cloudcast, you always have an open door if you want to come co-host. But thank you all so much for your time and kind of opening up your soul to us and for giving us, 5 or 6 years of really interesting conversation. So, any last minute things you'd like to say to the audience or kind of get off your chest?
Hey, well, thanks for having us, right? We're very proud of what we did. It was a really nice conversation. We connected with a great community. And I think you never start a project you can't end, right? You should always have an ending. And so we're off to new things. It's going to be fun.
Well, folks, with that, I'm going to wrap it up for Amy and John and Matthew and for Aaron, who will be back hopefully very soon. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.